The first time my husband told me he loved me, I almost cried. Not because I felt loved, because I realized I could not say it back honestly. I remember that moment clearly even now. The lantern beside our bed flickered softly, snow pressed against the farmhouse windows, and my husband, Caleb, looked at me with more tenderness than I deserved. We had been married nearly 4 months then, still newlyweds in the eyes of our Amish community. Everyone around us believed we were building a beautiful life together, but deep inside, I already knew something terrible. I did not love the man I married. My name is Hannah Lapp. I am 76 years old now, and for more than 50 years, I carried guilt that slowly hollowed me out from the inside. Because Caleb was not cruel, that would have made things easier. He did not drink, did not scream, did not shame me publicly. He worked hard, prayed faithfully, provided for our children. Most women in our church considered him an ideal Amish husband. That was the problem. Good men are much harder to leave emotionally, especially when the real reason lives inside your own heart. Before Caleb, there was another man. His name was Josiah. And even after all these years, part of me still belongs to him. I met Josiah during a barn raising when I was 18 years old. He laughed loudly, too loudly for most Amish boys, but I liked that immediately. He made life feel less heavy somehow. Back then, my world was very small. Church gatherings, laundry, farm work, cooking beside my mother. Everything predictable, everything controlled. But Josiah asked strange questions, beautiful questions. He once asked me what kind of life I truly wanted. I remember standing there speechless because nobody had ever asked me that before. Amish daughters are taught how to serve, not how to dream. Slowly, we began spending more time together after Sunday singings, walking near fields after dark, talking beside buggy sheds, tiny moments that felt enormous to me back then. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, not judged, not instructed, seen. Josiah wanted to leave Amish life someday. At first, that frightened me. Leaving meant losing family, church, community, everything. But when he spoke about it, his voice carried freedom instead of rebellion. He talked about building a smaller life somewhere far away, simple still, but chosen freely. No fear, no constant pressure to appear perfect. Sometimes I secretly imagined going with him. That was my first mistake. In Amish country, imagination can become dangerous very quickly, especially for women. My father discovered our relationship during harvest season. I still remember his face when he confronted me. Disappointment mixed with anger. Josiah already had a reputation for asking difficult questions during church meetings. Some believed he might eventually leave the community completely. That alone made him unacceptable in my father's eyes. "You will stop seeing him," my father said firmly. I tried arguing for the first time in my life. "I love him." The moment those words left my mouth, the room became silent, because Amish daughters were not supposed to speak that boldly to fathers. My father stared at me with cold eyes. "You are confusing feelings with wisdom." I cried that entire night, but crying changes very little inside strict homes. Over the next few months, my father watched me constantly. Church elders began visiting more often. My mother avoided eye contact whenever I mentioned Josiah's name. And slowly, Pressure closed around me from every direction. Then Caleb Lapp entered my life. Older than me by 7 years, quiet, steady, approved by everyone. The exact kind of husband Amish families trusted. At first, Caleb seemed almost gentle compared to my father. That made saying yes easier than it should have been. But deep down, every time he visited our farm, I felt panic instead of excitement. One evening before supper, I finally met Josiah one last time near Miller's Creek. The sunset looked beautiful across the water, orange light everywhere, the kind of evening people remember forever. And unfortunately, I did. Josiah looked exhausted, like he had not slept properly in weeks. "They're forcing this marriage," he whispered. I could not answer because he was right. He grabbed my hands tightly. "Come with me." My heart nearly stopped. "What?" "I leave next week." Fear rushed through me instantly. Leaving meant becoming an outsider forever. No family, no church, no return. Josiah's eyes filled with tears. "Hannah, please." For one terrible moment, I almost said yes. And sometimes I still wonder how different my entire life would have been if I had. But fear is powerful in Amish country. Fear of shame, fear of losing everyone, fear of becoming nobody. So instead, I slowly pulled my hands away. The look on Josiah's face destroyed something inside me forever. Then quietly, with tears running down his cheeks, he asked me one final question. "Will you ever truly love him?" The worst part, even before my wedding day, I already knew the answer was no. I never wanted. I married Caleb Lapp 3 weeks later. The morning of the wedding, my mother woke me before sunrise. The house already smelled like bread and roasted meat for the church meal afterward. Women moved quietly through the kitchen preparing food. My sisters helped brush my hair beneath my prayer covering. Everyone acted happy, excited, blessed. Meanwhile, I felt like I was walking toward my own funeral. That sounds cruel now, especially after everything Caleb did for me later in life. But it is the truth. And old women eventually grow tired of dying with lies still inside them. Outside, horses and buggies slowly filled the lane near our farmhouse. Church members arrived wearing dark coats against the cold November wind. People smiled warmly at me all morning. "You look beautiful, Hannah. Caleb is a good man. You are starting a wonderful life." I thanked them politely, because sometimes smiling is easier than screaming. During the ceremony, I barely remember the bishop's words. I remember looking at Caleb's hands instead, rough from years of farm work, steady, reliable hands, the kind women are supposed to feel safe with. And maybe I did feel safe, but safe and loved are not the same thing. That truth took me years to fully understand. After the wedding meal, everyone laughed and talked around us while Caleb and I sat side by side at the long table. Newly married, official, bound for life. I remember glancing toward the doorway several times without thinking. A small part of me still hoped Josiah might suddenly appear. He never did. And deep down, I think that was the moment I truly understood he was gone forever. The first months of marriage felt strange, not terrible, just empty in ways I could never explain to anyone. Caleb treated me kindly from the beginning. He thanked me for meals, helped carry heavy water buckets without being asked, never raised his voice unnecessarily. At night, he spoke softly while we lay beside each other in darkness, sometimes about crops, sometimes about future children, sometimes about simple hopes for our farm. And every time he looked at me with warmth, guilt spread deeper inside my chest. Because I knew something he did not. His wife was physically beside him, but emotionally, part of her was still standing beside Miller's Creek with another man. One winter night changed everything for me. Snow covered the fields outside. The farmhouse was quiet except for wind pushing gently against the walls. Caleb sat beside the lantern, repairing harness straps while I mended clothes nearby. After a long silence, he suddenly looked at me and smiled. "You still seem nervous around me sometimes." My stomach tightened instantly. I forced a small smile back. "I'm just tired." He studied me carefully for a moment, then softly said, "You know, I think I fell in love with you long before we married." The room suddenly felt too small. I lowered my eyes immediately, because there it was again, that terrible kindness. Cruel men are easier to survive emotionally. Good men force you to live with guilt instead. Caleb walked over slowly and sat beside me. Then he gently took my hand. "I love you, Hannah." My chest hurt instantly. This was the moment, the normal moment, the moment wives are supposed to smile warmly and say the words back. But I could not honestly. And lies spoken beside lantern light somehow feel heavier than daytime lies. So instead, I kissed his cheek softly and avoided answering completely. At the time, I convinced myself that love would eventually grow. Older women in church often claimed that happened. Love comes after building a life together, they used to say. So I waited. Months passed, then years. Children arrived. First Miriam, then little David. Life became busy enough to distract me from certain feelings. And from the outside, our marriage looked peaceful. Caleb worked hard. Our farm slowly expanded. People respected us. Sometimes younger women even asked me marriage advice. That always felt strangely painful, because nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew I still dreamed about Josiah sometimes. Not romantic dreams. Sad ones. Dreams where he simply looked at me silently, like he already knew the life I chose would never truly satisfy me. Then one summer afternoon, nearly 11 years into my marriage, everything changed again. I was hanging laundry behind the house when I noticed a car parked near the road. Cars rarely stopped near Amish farms unless someone needed directions. At first, I ignored it. Then the driver stepped out, and the moment I saw his face, the basket slipped from my hands completely. Because standing near the road after 11 years was Josiah, the man I thought I lost forever. For a moment, I truly believed I was imagining him. The summer heat, the sunlight, the years. Maybe my mind had finally become cruel enough to create ghosts. But then he started walking toward me slowly, and I realized it was really him. Older now, thinner, but unmistakably Josiah. My heart began pounding so hard I thought I might collapse right there beside the laundry line. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times over the years, sometimes in dreams, sometimes during quiet nights beside Caleb while guilt kept me awake. But in every version I imagined, Josiah looked angry or bitter or accusing. Instead, he looked sad. That somehow hurt even more. I glanced quickly toward the barn. Good. Caleb was still working with David near the horses. The children could not see us from there. Josiah stopped several feet away from me. Neither of us spoke at first. 11 years of silence stood between us. Finally, he gave a small, nervous smile. You still hang laundry the same way." The sound of his voice nearly broke me, because suddenly I was 18 again, standing near Miller's Creek, terrified of choosing the wrong future. I swallowed hard. "What are you doing here?" His eyes lowered briefly toward the ground. "My mother died last month." The sadness in his voice immediately softened something inside me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He nodded once. I came back for the funeral. Silence settled between us again. Wind moved softly through the sheets hanging nearby. Then Josiah looked at me carefully. "You look tired, Hannah." That sentence hit me harder than it should have, because nobody had asked how I truly looked in years. Not really. Women in Amish communities are expected to keep moving no matter how exhausted they become. Children, cooking, church, laundry, pregnancy, harvest seasons, quiet obedience. You survive by continuing, not by speaking honestly. And somehow, after one glance, Josiah saw straight through me anyway. "I'm fine," I lied softly. He smiled sadly. "You always say that when you're hurting." My eyes filled instantly. That was the dangerous thing about first love. Even after years apart, they still remember versions of you other people never notice. I quickly looked away before tears became visible. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "I know. People will talk. They already talked 11 years ago." I had no answer for that. Josiah looked toward the farmhouse quietly. Then he asked the question I feared most. "Are you happy?" The world seemed to stop moving. That question again. Always that question. And after all these years, I still could not answer honestly. Because the truth was complicated. Caleb had given me stability, children, safety, a respectable life. But happiness? Love? The kind that warms lonely places inside your chest? No. I lowered my eyes toward the grass. Josiah's face changed immediately. He understood without words. Pain crossed his expression so quickly it almost looked physical. Then softly he asked, "Does he treat you well?" I nodded. Yes. That part was true. Caleb was not cruel. And somehow that made my sadness feel even more shameful. Josiah exhaled slowly. "I kept hoping you'd leave someday." My chest tightened painfully. "What?" He looked embarrassed after admitting it. "I know that sounds foolish." Part of me wanted to cry right there, because for years, some secret part of me hoped the exact same thing. That life would somehow magically rearrange itself. That one day I would wake up brave enough to choose differently. But life does not work that way in Amish country. Women stay, even when their hearts disappear. A voice suddenly echoed from the barn. "Hannah!" Caleb. Fear rushed through my body instantly. Josiah stepped backward immediately. The old fear returned so naturally it shocked me. Even after all these years, part of me still felt terrified of being seen beside him. Caleb started walking toward the house carrying tools in one hand. The moment he noticed Josiah standing near me, his expression changed. Not angry, careful, like a man suddenly solving an old puzzle inside his head. Josiah straightened quietly. Caleb approached slowly until all three of us stood there in silence beneath the summer sun. Then Caleb looked directly at Josiah and asked something that made my blood run cold. "You're the reason she cries in her sleep sometimes, aren't you?" The truth, my husband always knew. The moment Caleb said those words, I stopped breathing. Everything around us suddenly felt painfully still. The wind, the fields, Even the sound of horses near the barn seemed far away now. Josiah looked stunned. I could not even raise my eyes toward Caleb, because deep down, I already knew something terrible. He was not guessing. He knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. For 11 years, I believed I had hidden my feelings successfully. I cooked meals, raised children, sat beside Caleb in church every Sunday, smiled during gatherings, built the life everyone expected from a faithful Amish wife. Meanwhile, all along, my husband had been quietly watching me survive a marriage I never fully entered emotionally. Caleb set his tools down slowly in the grass. His face remained calm. That frightened me more than anger would have. Anger passes. Calm pain stays. Josiah spoke first. I never meant to cause trouble. Caleb nodded once. I know. The kindness in his voice made my chest ache instantly. Nobody moved for several seconds. Then Caleb looked at me, not accusingly, not harshly, just tired. And that somehow hurt the most. How long has he been back? Only today, I whispered. Caleb studied my face carefully, then quietly asked, "Did you ever stop loving him?" There it was, the question I spent half a century avoiding. And suddenly I realized something heartbreaking. The man I married had probably carried this fear silently for years. I began shaking immediately, because there are moments in life when truth becomes unavoidable. This was one of them. Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to lie, I truly did. One final lie to protect everyone. But old age changes people. At 76, you begin understanding how exhausting dishonesty becomes. So instead, through tears, I slowly shook my head. No. The pain that crossed Caleb's face nearly destroyed me. Not dramatic pain, not shouting, just quiet heartbreak, the kind people carry privately for years. Josiah looked away completely, like he regretted ever coming back. Caleb inhaled slowly before speaking again. You know what the saddest part is? His voice trembled slightly for the first time. I loved you enough to notice. Tears rolled down my face instantly, because that was the truth. Caleb noticed everything. The distance in my eyes, the sadness after certain church songs, the way I stared too long toward roads during summer evenings, the crying during sleep. And somehow, he loved me anyway. That realization filled me with shame deeper than anything else in my life. Caleb sat down slowly on the wooden fence near the field. Suddenly, he looked much older than before. I used to pray you would eventually choose me completely, he admitted quietly. The words shattered me, not because he sounded angry, because he sounded defeated. Josiah remained silent beside us. Then Caleb asked something unexpected. Did you ask her to leave with you? Josiah nodded slowly. Yes. And she said no. Another nod. Caleb lowered his eyes toward the ground for several seconds. Then softly, almost to himself, he whispered, I think that was the day all three of us became trapped. Nobody spoke after that, because he was right. Josiah lost the woman he loved. I lost the life I truly wanted. And Caleb spent 50 years loving someone whose heart never fully belonged to him. 3 ruined lives, built from one fearful decision. Eventually, Caleb stood again. He looked toward Josiah with tired eyes. You should leave now. Josiah nodded immediately. Before turning away, he looked at me one final time. Not with anger, not with hope, just sadness. the kind shared between people who loved each other too late and not enough bravely. Then he walked back toward the road slowly. I watched until the car disappeared completely. Part of me wanted to run after him even then. At 76 years old, imagine that. But I stayed where I was, because staying had become the only thing I truly learned to do well. When I finally turned back toward Caleb, tears were running silently down his face. That was the first time I had ever seen my husband cry. And in that moment, after 50 years together, I realized something horrifying. I may never have loved the man I married, but I had absolutely broken him.